Well, thank you, Scott, and welcome everyone to this webinar. Hopefully, the with what we talk about in the next hour or so helps you make your outages and helps you avoid things that can either force you to spend more time in outage and or more money, and as well as increase the likelihood that somebody could get hurt on during one of your turbine outages. A little bit about me. Yeah, I haven't been in the industry quite for 40 years yet. I did co-op while I was in college, so I guess counting from then, it's more like 36 years, but I've lost count years ago. In any event, uh, I include the second or this our EHS guiding principles slide in every presentation that we make at TRS, because safety is our top priority. We'll take working safely over making an extra dollar or two any day. Quickly through the agenda, want to describe who we are, both TRS, and a little bit more about my background. We're going to talk about trust but verify, uh, having a plan B, um, not getting caught in the trap or claiming that my plan is better. A little bit talk a little bit about the most commonly talked about subject when it comes to turbine outages, other than the equipment themselves, in terms of how much money we need to spend. And then safety is it's not at the bottom of the list because it's not our top priority. But I want to spend as much time or give the time necessary to talk about some safety considerations during our major maintenance outages. And as Scott mentioned, want to reiterate that you want this to be as highly interactive as possible. So keep your questions, coming. I should be able to see them in the chat room, and I will try to answer as many as I can. Those that I can't answer or will prefer to answer, after the presentation, we can either try to have one-on-one conversations, or again, I'll wait till the end of the presentation to answer more specific questions. So while we're here today, is there's a lot at stake anytime that we go into or even are planning for a major maintenance outage on a turbine or generator or both. Um, we have always have the risk of missing timelines. We all know that not being available, not being reliable can be very, very expensive. And availability can be impacted by how long an outage takes. We all get graded on how much money we spend versus how much money we plan to spend. It can greatly impact ourselves personally, as well as the performance of our team and or our company. There's a higher likelihood of errors and injuries that we want to avoid at all costs. And then none of us like any additional hassle. We have a lot going on in our lives. It's been greatly impacted by the pandemic, and again, less hassle is strongly desired, hopefully by all of us. So many have seen this, this photo, or have actually done this exercise, performed this exercise, and hopefully your teammate didn't leave you or let you drop to the ground. In this case, wouldn't be too painful, but uh, some of the things that we'll talk about, trusting, or if we don't verify and we just simply trust, can be a lot more painful in terms of outage misses. Um, One of my, when I was putting together this presentation, I kept coming back to all of the experiences that I've had, the negative consequences surrounding turbine clearances. Many just take this with a grain of salt and just trust that the service contractor knows exactly what they're doing. We'll go through the process of verifying as found clearances against specifications, but there can be serious consequences in the event that clearances are taken. The service contractor, whether it's the OEM or a third party, says everything is good. And in the event that they're not good, there you have out of spec clearances. The impact can be significant because once the turbine cover goes on, or a generator is closed up, or any piece of equipment is closed up, it's impossible to retake those clearances without further disassembly. And anytime you have to take a step back, a major step back like that, it can have, again, significant schedule and financial impacts. An example that comes to mind, or the biggest breakdown that I experienced related to clearances, was a machine was put back together with grossly out of spec clearances. It underperformed by 8 megawatts, or in this case by 20%, for about a year in terms of lost generation, and then subsequent or the extra work that we had to perform to get the clearances back in specification the next time we opened the unit up, forced us to spend a significant amount more time and money. So, trust that the clearances are being taken properly, but please verify that they are where they need to be. Another area where not verifying, but trusting somebody's word is when a piece of equipment is closed up. I've experienced, or the companies that I've worked for have experienced multiple times, tools left in the equipment, left in the machine. Most of the time we got lucky and found that the tool had been left in the machine during a previous outage with no consequences. But there are also an equal number of examples to where a tool left in a machine, or having contamination in an inlet duct or an exhaust, can have very detrimental effects to the equipment itself. So a simple act of teaming, or having multiple people inspect an enclosure, or inspect a part of a piece of equipment where a tool or tools could be left, is a good way to ensure, a better way to ensure that this won't happen going forward. Another area where I think it's important to verify is when it comes to people's backgrounds, especially the millwrights, the mechanics, the supervision of the people that you're entrusting your machine during the outage period. If they are not who they say they are, or they don't have the kind of skill set that you need, or the work ethic, again, that can cause outage delays, unsafe work practices, and you spending more time, effort, and money, and having a much greater hassle during the outage. And then finally, trusting that it'll only take X days, because this is how long it took in the past. I suggest that we ask around, ask how this same contractor has performed, or with my unique set of issues that I'm trying to deal with during the outage. How long did it take to deal with this particular issue? Or that particular issue. So, understanding who in your network has experienced the same, type of outage, generally speaking, at another site, or another, owner's site, is a good way to validate what you're hearing, and give you the confidence that your outage is going to go as planned, and hopefully under budget. Some of the other, some of the things that we hear often when it comes, to, uh, maintenance contractors and other folks that are involved in your turbine outage is everything is ready to go. But I was told it would be ready yesterday. All clearances again are within spec, and then we would be ready or we stay ready. So again, they're in the parentheses. Um, I asked myself, well, that sounds good, but can you really deliver? But I was told it would be ready yesterday, but you're doomed to fail if you don't, or if you're just relying on what somebody says, because things can happen. And then all clearances are within spec are, my favorite. I hear that, I immediately will, ask for a, personal review of those clearances. And then, readiness is oftentimes a state of mind, and there's no better way to ask, uh, prove that you're ready. Where's the completed checklist? I've also added a couple of questions on the bottom of the page. I'm sure that this audience, have you seen this play out in the past? Or another good example that I haven't included of verifying, something that if you didn't or hadn't have verified, would have created a bad situation for you. And then what other solutions? Beside a checklist, beside calling somebody out or questioning them in a professional way, have helped you guys going forward. Does anybody have any questions, comments? Let me bring up the chat. And
I did see one question. I did see one question come in, Greg. Just more of based on your experience, some of the most common, big misses that you've seen or experienced during an outage.
Yeah, the two biggest misses, I mentioned one or highlighted at the beginning is taking clearances and either they weren't taken properly and they were out of spec, or they were taken properly and they were out of spec, and the customer and the key decision makers or the folks that are empowered to and qualified to assess those clearances aren't involved in the conversation. The machine is put back together, and the customer's left with the underperforming machine, or a machine to where components are rubbing on each other unnecessarily. The time to um, challenge data and challenge those type of things is obviously before the unit's put back together. But I've seen this missed countless times, because either we're all in a hurry, or we just all assume that the maintenance contractor and the technical support for that maintenance contractor knows exactly what they're doing. Um, another frequent miss is trusting what you're hearing from a key vendor. It'll be ready this afternoon, or it'll be ready tomorrow, or it's going to show up at X date. Um, that's maybe a little bit harder to verify, but in a lot of those cases, um, just staying more on top of it than you otherwise would, or more frequently ask questions. I'm engaged with a customer that asks me 2 or 3 times a day that the status of a certain repair. Um, Not only am I obligated, but it, helps give him the peace of mind or having those more frequent updates. So don't hesitate to ask, frequently, or as frequently as you need to satisfy that what you are hearing is in fact true. Now, Plan B. Um, we all experience, and hopefully not frequently experience, but all experience nonetheless, having changes in our grand plan. Um, I don't know how many football fans are, in the obvious, are in the audience, but I know our CEO and, myself are diehard college football fans. In this case, I'm in it, Texas A&M graduate, and I obviously follow and love my Aggie football. The second game of the season, our starting quarterback, he was a true freshman, or actually a redshirt freshman from a high school here in Texas, got hurt. And we were basing and I think a lot of the public and the press was basing our success on how this kid did in high school. Make a long story short, he got hurt in the second game. Our backup quarterback hasn't performed, to anyone's expectations, including his. So, what happens when your grand plan, goes awry, or any details of your plan? Some of the areas or situations that we're in that may or should require a plan B is, well, I have that part in inventory. But what if you don't have that that part, or you won't have that part, or you can't have that part in inventory? Um, on a recent outage, I heard, well, my rotor is sitting at the state line. And then 2 days later, it was still sitting at the state line, and it was obviously a critical path component. These aren't the folks we expected. We expected the A team. This isn't in an A team. We'll be ready. And what if we're not? And then stuff happens. Sometimes we are surprised, especially like when we're bore scoping engines. Surprises happen, unfortunately, all the time. Um, could we have predicted this? In a lot of cases, we can't. So, in terms of Plan B, oftentimes when we're doing or performing a hot gas path or a combustion inspection on a gas turbine, we will take a look at, or part of the scope is to survey the compressor. We're often surprised by what we find, but knowing that we're likely to find something, or in the event that we find something within a compressor, what is our plan? Do we have parts in inventory? Does our LTSA provider, if we have one, have an LTSA? Do they have parts in stock? In the event that they don't, where else can we find parts? Um, who can verify the risk that we are taking by leaving a damaged compressor component as is, and just operating for a period of time. Another area where we have I suggest that we have a plan B is in the event that the crew is capable, or we know that going into an outage, especially when we're in a forced outage situation, if nobody's A team is available, how can we hedge our bet? How can we bring in additional technical resources or other supervision to help us, again, hedge our bet, and to allow the less capable, team to achieve the same level of success? What happens if a part doesn't fit? Fortunately, this doesn't happen as often as it used to when technology was newer, and when companies like TRS was a lot younger, when we were still learning how to repair certain components. And it still happens today when a repaired component or even new components, have machining errors, experiencing, errors to the repair of the part, or the part wasn't repaired to the right specification. The part might not fit. Is there a way that we can build in a contingency or have a contingency plan in the event that that happens? Another, example is we don't have time to perform a specific work scope. How much risk are we taking? And that's part of the plan B, assembly or, creation process, is first asking if we're willing to take the risk. How do we manage that and make that part of our plan B? And I mentioned we have a load stuck at the state line. What's our contingency plan with the heavy hauler, or with the state authorities, or whatever is creating the schedule holdup or the transportation holdup? One of the listeners asked if I will provide a checklist at the end of this. I certainly can. I actually have two different ones. One is prior to the outage, and one that you could use during the outage. Another one is a shorter post outage checklist. But nonetheless, I can provide an example of one that I've used in the past. It's somewhat generic, but that's simply because your outage checklist should be specific to your equipment, to your outage work scope, whereas my generic outage checklist is intended to ensure that the more detailed checklist includes all of the items on mine. And if anybody has would be, willing to share an example to where, having a plan B, saved you significantly, or a lack thereof, feel free to share that experience. And what other solutions beyond having an outage checklist, or a baseline plan have helped you in terms of contingency planning?
Greg, we had a question come in. I guess, it's about how the pandemic has affected parts availability and such. Do you have any experience with not being able to get today parts you used to get without any scheduled delays in the past? And have these potential delays impacted recent outages?
I can't speak to delays on new components. In terms of repaired components, consumables, and real time or in situ repairs, I think those have been more greatly affected. TRS has to many customers supplied certain outage consumables. I have heard of delays in receiving some of the larger consumable hardware or one-use items. But as far as nuts, bolts, gaskets, I haven't seen in the where I've been working with a customer in the field, haven't seen a great impact. Where I have seen the most impact is shop capacity and availability, where some shops were impacted by local regulations, and they're still catching up. People have left their positions at these facilities, and those craftsmen haven't been replaced. I've seen, scheduled delays as a result. Something that would take normally 7 days to complete is now taking 21 days. And Bearings is a good example. We had I have a customer that's in a forced outage, and we called, our primary or go-to, bearing repair vendors, and they were very, very busy, or they were capacity limited. And I don't know if that was due to not having as many people, or if it's just because there's enough backlog that was created because of what we experienced last year. I can't answer that specifically, other than I haven't seen a significant impact on delivery of capitals. I don't have as much insight to that as I do on component repairs per se, but um, I imagine the answer across the board is yes. But again, I've seen it more greatly in terms of service providers than I have on manufacturers. I hope that helps.
Thank you. And then there's another question related to your third bullet point here as a plan B. Is this one of the reasons why users are utilizing third-party outage TAs more often? And can you talk about your experience, working alongside of those types of companies?
Yeah, absolutely. I have more visibility, here in Texas and in the Northeast, where I have I've been working with some customers. Um, the To answer your question, the first part of your question, I would answer that with a resounding yes. It's created the need, not only because of uh, outage concentration, or how outages just ended up on top of each other, whereas 2 years ago they weren't. There's been over the last 10 years or so, there's been a significant change in outage concentration in the fall, let's say, to where people are just waiting as long as possible and doing as much work as possible between mid-January and mid-May, and in some cases even into the early summer months. So um, there's only so many people to go around. I don't believe that apprenticeship schools, and they're bringing in as many new millwrights on the non-union side either. So it's just the economics of the business that are driving that need to have other sets of eyes and ears. Not that additional TFA will make or break your outage, but it can certainly help. The outages that I've provided that additional support for have benefited, both because of labor quality, and in some cases, just another set of eyes and experienced set of eyes and ears can help push or um, uh, bring into the project manager's field of view, or ask them a question, or have them understand something that they didn't understand without my help. So I can't see how it would hurt, other than we're not necessarily free either. So, but I do see that some of the changes that we've seen at certain OEMs in terms of how they uh, manage or use their TFAs, as compared to how they used to use it in the past. It's a different world. So it's a numbers, a lack of numbers, and in some cases a lack of experience, and in other cases it's just the number of outages that exist at any point in time. Um, so there's a lot of variables and a lot of things to solve for, but yeah, I mean, there's as time goes on, a greater need for those that can supplement the existing, or in some cases, be the primary technical supervisor, or provide the primary technical support for an outage. And I appreciate our CEO for providing this picture. It's hopefully we're not slapped upside the head to remind us that that things change. They can change very, very quickly, or they can change very, very slowly, and the effects of that change can be just as significant or even more than an abrupt change. So in terms of my plan is better, I hear this not all the time, but I've heard it, frequently enough. I wanted to include it. We've already taken the time to develop our plan. This is exactly what you need, and that's a maintenance contractor or an OEM, telling or making that claim. This is what we did the last time. How often do we not rest on our laurels, but base our plan on exactly what we did the last time? We understand our risks, and then this is what the book says. Um, there's a lot of good information and a lot of good books, but does anybody believe everything that they read? Some examples that I had and I know there are some, or there could be some OEM representatives, and this is not meant to, demean, anybody that, currently or has worked for an OEM, but sometimes or oftentimes we defer to implicitly, or, completely to to an OEM. I'm not saying that that's it's a bad thing, but it's always a good idea to not challenge in so much, or challenge if we need to, but just ask pertinent questions to ensure that the plan that we execute to is the plan that we need to execute to. Um, an example that I've experienced, recently is in performing a work scope review, a pre-bid work scope review, for a customer. I identified a lot of missing work scope, or vaguely written and or work scope that doesn't need to be performed in order to properly manage your risk. Um, and in those cases, I just made recommendations. We should do this, or in my experience, we did this or did that. And at the end of the day, produced a work scope that um, I think everybody would agree that is, the most reasonable, most practical to perform in this particular case. Um, Again, what if things change? The example actually ties back to, safety conversation I'll have at the towards the end of this webinar. Um, we had in a prior life, we had a expertly written lifting plan that had worked flawlessly at least a dozen times before. We also had produced, for that same outage, a laydown plan that worked in concert with our lifting plan to place heavy items within their designated laydown area. During the course of the outage, our scope expanded, so we ran out of room in our laydown area. As an end result, a decision was made, and I'll elaborate that later, to actually make a heavy lift over an area where, in an area and over a structure that we were forbidden to make a liftover. So having a contingency, or this as it ties back to having a plan B, if your situation changes, should your plan change, or at least take a look at how that change in your situation could potentially impact. Because you're leaving out just one detail when your situation changes, could produce some devastating consequences. And it's more often to happen when you have to change your plan real time versus when let's say your budget dollars change, or your schedule changes, or your outage start time changes. Those are most of the time. Um, uh, it's a lot easier to change your outage schedule before you actually start doing work rather than in the middle of it. But you're you should have a heightened sense of awareness, or suggest that you have a heightened sense of awareness when your plans change in the middle of an outage, to make sure that you're checking all the boxes, and that a change in your plan doesn't produce the wrong results. And one thing that I've noticed since I became a consultant as well as a CTO at TRS, is no one wants to admit that their plan is not better. Um, I've got in short of arguments, or had heated conversations with folks about uh, why I'm making suggestions to change their plan, and in some instances, it's like talking to the wall. So I guess what I'm trying to say is nobody has a perfect plan. Most of you have well executed plans and have very positive outage experiences. But there's no harm in hurt in having somebody to review your plan, whether it's a peer, somebody else in your organization, somebody outside the organization that you trust, um, to keep the conversation confidential. But even my best laid plans, when I was a project manager or a field engineer with General Electric, um, when the moment I thought my plan was perfect, when I was setting myself up for failure. Any other new questions, Scott, or the audience?
We haven't had any come in yet, but certainly please enter your questions or comments in the chat, or raise your hand.
And I am dating myself when including this slide. Uh, I used to be actually, when I was in college, was an ABBA fan, or even before that, in their heyday. And this was one of my favorite songs. So thank you again, John, for including this, or helping me with this. And I'm sure that we hear everybody in the audience hears this, hears one or more of these comments or quips frequently. We all have limited funds. If you have unlimited funds, please let me know who you are, uh, and I want to develop a really strong relationship with you. Um, but I blew my budget again. Have looked in the mirror and said this to myself numerous times when I was more in charge of purse strings in a previous life. I wish I would have known. Um, we understand life cycle costs, and then why pay more? Well, it's a very good question. As is the case with the other slide, we have some questions and some trigger questions. Have you seen this play out in the past, and whether solutions have helped you, in terms of managing to your budget? or performing better to budget. I want to want to include right off the bat one caveat. Sometimes you have to spend money to solve a chronic or emergent problem. For those that have operated 501F or Siemens Westinghouse 501F machines, if you recall, about 11 years ago, there was a fleet-wide issue that literally affected every installed unit that had operated original style row-two blades. There we had to, because our fleet was so big, we had to spend large sums of money both buying new parts and as well as installing or replacing the problematic part. So again, sometimes that's the card that or that's the hand that you're dealt, and you have to spend money. But when you don't have that type of, or you're not in that type of situation, oftentimes we're in a situation where we have to make decisions real time. So how do I do this? How do I perform this emergent work without blowing my budget? One way or one suggestion is to assess the rest of your work scope, additional time. Whether your plan is well vetted or not, ask yourself the question: do I really have to perform this work scope, or can I wait? In the instances where you do, and you may not have any choice but to spend more money than you had planned to. But if you can make those trade-offs, please do, or recommend that you do. It also gives you another opportunity to revisit your priorities. Is what I'm doing, is the work that I'm performing to the engine or to the generator, what I need to do to appropriately manage my risk of operating this machine. And in those cases where the answer is no, well, I don't really need to do that. That might be a good way for you to um, uh, move those funds to deal with a more pressing problem. Um, One of the most frequent budget misses that I've experienced or I've seen, happen to organizations um, that I've led in the past is not knowing where all of the money is going after the outage is over. In this case, in component repairs. Uh, if there are trends that develop over time, such as you have increased fallout or you don't really understand, um, what your fallout numbers are, invariably you're going to spend more money on, or you're going to have an increase in life cycle costs, for that component merely because you're not, tracking that closely, or you just simply don't know. An example I like to use is we were pretty good at tracking and managing our life cycle costs in a previous life, but there was one part was repaired at an unnamed repair facility where um, we were actually paying to replace fallout through that company and not through our own inventory. Um, we had plenty of orphan parts that we could have used to replace fallout with similar pedigrees. Um, and by replacing fallout or, with new components at this repair facility and not tracking the cost of those new components, our life cycle costs were a lot greater for that individual component than we purported and reported it to be. So, it took blowing our repair budget for, a couple of years and identifying the reason why before we could actually rectify it. So, knowing where all of, every penny that you spend on a component, whether it's the cost of the part, it's the cost to repair the part, it's the cost to replace fallout, and not the accounting cost, but the actual cost is in my opinion, produces a more accurate life cycle cost. And then finally, when it comes to managing to budget, hash everything out, beforehand. If you're not comfortable with your budget, and also, as it pertains to your schedule too, um, have somebody take a second look. Why, I can't seem to do everything that I need to do with limited funds. And a peer review can be a good way to help you reevaluate your priorities, reevaluate your risks of changing your work scope, and then enabling you to find ways to save money in order to have funds available in the case that you find emergent work. So understanding your life cycle costs, not being afraid to talk about the concerns that you have, um, as well as reevaluating your priorities as to a best extent possible while you're performing the work are three ways that have helped me manage to budget or to improve my budget performance. Again, this is very expensive work that we do to very expensive engines, and it's never easy to manage within budget, especially with the various constraints and the different constraints and the unique constraints that we have in our individual plants and within our individual companies.
All right, Greg, we got a few more questions in the queue here for you.
Awesome.
Can you offer up any suggestions on how to shorten outage durations?
I think the best or most accurate or the best advice I could give would be specific to whoever's asking the question, because I think it's situationally dependent.
Okay, have you noticed specific aspects of outage management that require more attention today than, say, 5 years ago?
I think where we see, let me answer that question by or using an example of what happens if you don't or if you can't. Um, there are so many with many contractors, there are a lot of additional burdens placed on the project manager, be it the on-site safety requirements, permitting, personnel management, lotto. There, the project requirements today compared to 20 or 30 years ago are materially different. So and everybody has limited capacity. So identifying where those what's not being done to support or to be able to perform as you expect to perform is one way. And just identifying the help that various team leaders need. um, it's kind of I won't say it's a difficult answer, but outage management is a little more involved in most cases, and knowing what help the project manager needs without materially changing the requirements. Do we want to, eliminate work scope, or not, um, want our project manager or project team, overall to check all of the safety boxes is not the right answer, but identifying what help they need, and being able to supply additional resources. Now, when it comes to, technical support, we've talked about that earlier. That's a good way in the event that you have a complicated outage, and another set of eyes and ears, or additional full coverage from a technical standpoint is warranted. Um, and then in some cases, just bringing in some other contract resources to help out with safety, and or with, being a whole watch. Contractors or, customers alike have been doing that for a long time, but it starts with identifying where those resources are need to uh, prevent you guys from letting your guard down, and or, underperforming in a certain area.
All right, thank you. Got another question. It's a flip on the shortening the outage question. What controllable items have you seen that can unexpectedly extend the outages? Not just found work, but operational, lotto, etc.
Yeah, one of the most recent examples is the entire team not having a clear understanding of the lotto procedures. When we're rebuilding a unit, or we're we're disassembling and reassembling a unit, there are periods to where we only need to have the lube oil operational so we can rotate the rotor. I've seen instances to where that takes a shift to be able um, to segregate, or to delotto the machine to where we can get the oil turned back on. And that time it took was due almost completely to ignorance on the part of the maintenance contractor. They didn't know how that process worked at that particular facility. Those are the type of questions that should have been asked, well before the outage started. So, a process that normally takes an hour, wouldn't take 12 hours. That's one area. You mentioned not in, as far as, emergent work. Had another instance where part of the scope was replacing the bearings, and nobody had asked their bearing repair supplier what their capacity limitations were. So when it came time to actually perform that work scope and ship this part to that repair facility, a normal 1 week duration turned into 2.5 weeks, subsequently added 3 days to the outage schedule. So I would tie that back to some of the recommendations that I made in the Plan B discussion.
There were also some questions from the registration that dealt with spares management, and maybe you can talk a little bit about the best methods to plan for the unknown for capital spares while balancing cost constraints.
I'd like to leave that to the end, simply because I do want to be able to talk, or spend the time necessary to talk about my last item, and that is safety.
Okay.
This is kind of near and dear to my heart. I've been in the field and in the turbine generator major maintenance space my entire career, and it wasn't until recently that I ever saw an ambulance actually pull up to a job site that I was on. I'm thankful for never having that experience. In this case, it was a medical event. It wasn't an accident or it had nothing to do with the safe work practices on the site. Just something happened, but we never want to see this, both on or off the job if we can absolutely avoid it. But some of the things that I've heard in the field and unfortunately continue to hear is we haven't had an injury in a while. We follow all the rules. I think we all feel that way, that we follow the rules. Um, uh, we've all heard the words "talk is cheap," and it can be very expensive. We know we are all human, and we have lives outside of work. Um, terms of on-site safety and safety in general, or as far as outages are concerned, a not so recent trend is contractors and or users having dedicated safety engineers, um, and that can be a waste of time to the perfect solution for ensuring that everybody on your job site is working safely. My advice here or suggestion is you want the picky ones. You don't want and they can be, the strong silent type until, they identify, something, but you want the ones that are picky, that are ensuring that everybody is doing the right thing and following the rules. Now, some can go overboard and create, more problems than they're solving. But in any event, just having a dedicated safety person, on site, um, doesn't benefit you unless they A, know their job, and B, are are actually doing something meaningful and pointing out where we're not working safely or how we can do things better. Um, on a more positive note, in the safety space, I hear frequently about greater empowerment. 32 years ago, when I started with GE, I didn't hear as often as I'd like, a millwright foreman or a customer representative saying that we could empower them to stop work. I hear that almost every job or customer that I interface with. So a great way to ensure that your team is going to work safely, or at a minimum avoid a unsafe situation, is to empower them, to say no, to empower them to check their peer, to point out when somebody's doing something unsafely. Um, and I also want to, I guess, on a less positive note, remind everybody that yes, we all are human, and we practice what we do off-site, on-site, and vice versa. The analogy I like to use, or the question I want to throw out or challenge everybody with, is for those that do their own landscaping or yard work, do you wear ear protection and eye protection like you would if you were just watching a turbine be overhauled on site? It's much riskier, or you have a much greater chance of a piece of grass or a rock or something, damaging your eye when you're weed eating than you do watching a rotor lift, let's say. So, again, what you practice at home is how you practice or execute it, on the job. And suggests that your safe work practices that you have off the job become habits, or on the job, excuse me, become habits off the job, and again, vice versa. Um, Oftentimes, we also rest on our laurels. We haven't had an injury in a while. Doesn't mean you're not going to have one tomorrow. Don't rest on your laurels. For 25 years, I watched millwrights use knives as anything from scrapers to clean gaskets to flanges to cutting or to using it the way it was intended to. And then we had a rash of knife-related injuries. We rested on our laurels. There's no way people are they know how to use knives. They know how to use these tools. And even if they were using them properly, if they took their glove off or again, they weren't watching what they were doing, they had a greater tendency, and in some cases, it just resulted in having a rash of injuries. Um, Here at I won't name any names, but a recent experience was just touting um, our safety results, our safety experience, that nobody's been hurt. We've had any, but an audit of our personnel showed that barely 50% of them were wearing safety glasses. Um, and again, we rested on our laurels. We didn't have any eye injuries, but it was a sobering reminder that just because we haven't in the past doesn't mean we won't going forward. And then I also want to, mention the least common denominator. I mentioned earlier where we had a change in the amount of equipment we were putting in our carefully planned laydown plan. In this case, somebody made a decision on their own to not follow the plan when we were out of sight of this individual, and it resulted in making a very risky move. You can't necessarily plan for that, but you can implore on everybody to communicate and to make sure that they are following all of the rules and not going off and doing their own thing. Because all it takes is one person doing something that they know better, or maybe they don't know better not to do, that results in a significant injury and or fatality. So a few parting thoughts or a summary of suggestions that I've made, or recommendations, is know your parts and know your people in advance of the outage. By that, know who's going to be managing your project. Know who's going to be actually turning wrenches, so to speak. Um, Know who also is available to help in the event that you need to, or you identify the need for additional resources to help with your outage. Know what parts you have in inventory and where, but it goes back further than that. Know what parts that you need. And again, there are folks that can help in the event that your team needs help. Know how to do better and who can help. That's just simply a fancy or a goofy way of saying, take your lessons learned where you had breakdowns in the past and or others have had breakdowns, and learn from those experiences, and who can help prevent having similar experiences going forward. Um, Know that going into any outages, that changes are to be expected, and nobody's perfect. Things can happen, most likely will, but with a plan B and just a heightened sense of awareness and knowing your priorities, you can avoid some of the consequences that change can make to your outage. Um, a few more, quips or, philosophies is plan to fail if you fail to plan. It goes without saying. A well orchestrated or well crafted and then orchestrated plan typically results in music that's pleasant to everyone's ears in terms of schedule, outage, and safety perform schedule, financial, and uh, safety performance. Uh, I'm one of life cycle cost management is um, near and dear to my heart. Is the key to optimizing your major maintenance results. If you don't track it, you can't, or it's much harder to identify, um, where you're spending money, and you don't even without even realizing it until after you've already spent it. And then safe work is a mindset, a 24/7 mindset. It's not just a 7 to 7 or whatever shift you're on mindset, or a mindset it's work. While you're at work, it's a 24/7 mindset. And that's all I have from a presentation standpoint. Do we have any more questions? And I see Scott has listed how to connect to me on LinkedIn, and I'd love to answer any questions, offline. So keep them coming, and again, just know that we're here to help. Um, there is a question, can the generic checklist you mentioned be emailed out to the registered guests? Absolutely.
All right, Greg. I mean, really the only question that we had left over from registration was about planning for the unknown and, capital spares from a capital spares perspective, while balancing cost constraints, which is probably a pretty big challenge that you might have some experience with.
Um, yeah, without going into specifics or providing a very detailed answer, which would be, it would take some time, is to know your alternatives. In some cases, there aren't. Like if you have an LTSA, you're under, you most likely have a contractual obligation to only source parts from one company, but know who else can in the event that they can't. Some LTSAs or LTPs also have uh, uh, gives the owner the ability to source outside of the OEM in the event that they can't provide. So yeah, again, know what your alternative sources are. Also know whether or not you can use repaired parts versus new. We have a pretty uh, deep, network um, of, especially on older frames, or and older technology units, to where we can either find a new part, or more than likely um, a properly repaired component that's suitable for service. So a good starting point is to know your alternatives and know what alternatives are at your disposal. And then I would also add to, and this really applies to everything that I've mentioned in this webinar, is to grow your network. Participate in webinars like this. Go to conferences, even if it's remotely, and again, to grow your network. I can't tell you how many countless times we've helped a customer here at TRS because of our network, the size of our network. In my previous employer, even having hundreds of millions of capital spares and repaired spares on the shelf. We still developed a fairly robust network in the event that we needed something we didn't have, and that our primary provider could not provide. Hope that helps.
Thanks a lot, Greg. I don't see any more questions that came in. We'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and have a look for Greg's contact details in the chat and copy and paste those. We'll be sending out the checklist, the outage checklist, and link to the recording of today's presentation. So please forward that on to other people in your organization who might be able to benefit from it. Greg, always a pleasure, and thanks so much for your time today. Likewise, and thanks for allowing me to share a lot of my experiences. And again, I can't reiterate. We're here to help each other, because it's a difficult, expensive, and ever-changing market or business that we're in.